2 days left before your soulmate makes a move that can't be taken back. Don't scroll past this, don't tell yourself you'll come back later, and don't let your mind rush ahead of your heart. Stay right here with me, because this moment matters more than you realize. There are 2 days left, not as a threat, not as pressure, but as a window. A window where something that has been forming quietly, patiently, and relentlessly inside your soulmate is finally reaching the point of action. This isn't impulse. This isn't confusion. This is the result of a long internal journey that has been unfolding long before you became consciously aware of it. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate has been standing at the edge of a decision that carries weight. Not dramatic weight, not reckless weight, but the kind of weight that comes when someone knows they are about to change the direction of their life. For a long time, they've been sitting with feelings they tried to minimize, explaining them away as temporary or inconvenient. They told themselves they had time. They told themselves silence was safer. But something shifted recently, and now time feels different to them. It feels limited in a way it never did before. Stay with me here, because this isn't about rushing toward an outcome, it's about understanding the gravity of what's forming. Your soulmate has reached a point where staying the same feels heavier than changing. And when that happens, action becomes inevitable. The move they're considering isn't something they can undo easily. Once it's done, the emotional landscape changes permanently. They know that. That's why these last 2 days feel so intense for them internally, even if nothing looks different on the surface. Don't look away now, because this next part explains why you may have been feeling unsettled lately. You might have noticed restlessness, a strange sense of anticipation, or moments where your thoughts drift toward them without invitation. This isn't coincidence. When two souls are connected, major decisions don't happen in isolation. Energy moves ahead of action. Your nervous system is picking up on a shift before your mind has language for it. Stay here and listen closely, because your soulmate has been replaying conversations that never happened. Words they almost said. Messages they almost sent. Paths they almost chose. Not out of regret, but out of clarity. They're seeing patterns now, how avoidance protected them in the short term but cost them something real in the long term. That awareness is uncomfortable, but it's also empowering. It's pushing them toward a choice that feels honest, even if it's scary. Don't rush past this moment, because fear is part of what makes the decision irreversible. Once they act, they can't pretend they don't care. They can't go back to emotional neutrality. They can't unknow what they now know. That's why they've been hesitating, not because they're unsure, but because they understand the consequence of truth. Truth changes dynamics. Truth demands responsibility. Stay with me, because you need to hear this clearly. The move they're considering isn't about control or manipulation. It's about alignment. It's about stepping out of emotional limbo and choosing a direction instead of staying suspended between possibilities. Whether that direction brings you closer or forces a necessary reckoning, it will be real. And real things leave marks. Listen carefully now, because timing is doing something intentional here. 2 days is enough time for final resistance to fall away, but not enough time to retreat back into comfort. Your soulmate is being gently cornered by their own growth. Old distractions aren't working. Old justifications feel thin. Silence feels louder than words. This is what happens when avoidance runs out of room. Don't skip this part, because it explains your role without placing pressure on you. You are not meant to intervene. You are not meant to provoke or test or demand clarity. Your role right now is presence without force. Grounding without expectation. When someone is on the verge of an irreversible decision, external pressure can distort the outcome. Calm, however, creates safety. Safety allows honesty to emerge cleanly. Stay right here, because your soulmate is also questioning who they want to be after this move. They know that once they act, they'll be stepping into a version of themselves that requires consistency. This isn't a one-time gesture. It's a line crossed. And lines crossed change identity. They're asking themselves if they're ready to live with the consequences, not just emotionally, but practically. Listen closely, because you may notice signs intensifying over these 2 days. Repeating numbers, vivid dreams, unexpected reminders, moments where time feels oddly suspended. These aren't predictions, they're confirmations. When timelines converge, reality leaves markers. Not to scare you, but to keep you aware. Awareness prevents panic. Awareness allows you to receive instead of react. Don't look away now, because here's the part most people misunderstand. Even if the move doesn't look exactly like you imagined, its impact will be just as significant. Sometimes irreversible decisions are quiet. Sometimes they happen internally before they ever show up externally. But once the internal decision is made, behavior eventually follows. Seeds planted this deeply don't remain buried forever. Stay with me, because your own emotional state matters more than you think right now. If you're anxious, notice it without feeding it. If you're calm, protect that calm. The energy you hold will influence how whatever comes next is received. Reception matters as much as action. A grounded response can turn a fragile moment into a stable turning point. Listen carefully here, because the next 2 days are not about waiting helplessly. They're about alignment. Alignment with your values, your boundaries, your truth. No matter what move your soulmate makes, you don't lose yourself in it. You meet it from a place of self-trust. That's what keeps outcomes healthy instead of destabilizing. Don't rush past this realization. Irreversible doesn't mean destructive. It means defining. Defining moments clarify what's real and what isn't. They remove ambiguity. They end emotional guessing games. And while that can feel intimidating, it often brings relief. Relief comes when uncertainty stops dragging on. Stay here with me a little longer, because this is where courage quietly replaces fear. Courage isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as willingness to face truth without guarantees. That's what your soulmate is gathering right now. And courage, once gathered, doesn't usually wait long to be used. Listen carefully now, because no matter how this unfolds, you will recognize the shift when it happens. Your body will register it before your mind does. There will be a sense of, something has changed, even if you can't explain how yet. Trust that feeling. It's more accurate than speculation. Don't look away at the end of this, because these 2 days are not about bracing for impact. They're about staying present for possibility. Possibility doesn't promise a specific outcome, it promises movement. And movement is better than stagnation when growth is involved. Stay with me through this moment. Breathe. Let anticipation soften into awareness. Whatever move your soulmate makes will come from a place that's been carefully shaped by reflection, fear, honesty, and readiness. And whatever follows, you will be able to meet it grounded, clear, and intact. If this message resonated with you, if it felt like it spoke to something unfolding in real time, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next part will help you understand what happens after the move is made. And how to navigate what comes next without losing yourself. Don't skip this, stay with me right now, because what happens after a decision is often more important than the decision itself. The moment your soulmate internally commits to a move that can't be taken back, something subtle but permanent shifts inside them. It's not relief exactly, and it's not fear either. It's a grounding. A sense that a line has been crossed within themselves, even before the world sees any evidence of it. That internal crossing changes how they breathe, how they think, how they interpret everything that follows. Listen carefully, because once a decision becomes irreversible internally, the mind stops debating and starts preparing. Your soulmate begins rehearsing not just words, but identity. Who they will be after this. How they will carry themselves. What kind of emotional honesty they're willing to live with. This preparation isn't dramatic. It's quiet, methodical, and deeply personal. They are no longer asking, "Should I?" They are asking, "How do I do this without betraying myself?" Stay right here, because this is where most people misunderstand silence. Silence after an internal decision doesn't mean doubt. It often means respect for consequence. Your soulmate understands that once they act, they can't retreat into ambiguity. That awareness makes them careful. Careful doesn't mean hesitant. It means intentional. They want whatever comes next to be clean, not reactive. Don't look away now, because you might be feeling something change in yourself too. A sense of alertness without anxiety. A feeling that something is about to surface, even if you don't know what shape it will take. That's your intuition adjusting to new information that hasn't arrived consciously yet. When timelines shift, the body often knows first. Stay with me, because after the decision, your soulmate starts noticing the world responding differently. Conversations land differently. Distractions don't hold the same power. Even routine interactions feel slightly misaligned. That's because when someone commits internally, they stop unconsciously leaking energy into indecision. That reclaimed energy sharpens perception. Listen closely here, because this phase can feel emotionally intense for them in short bursts. Not overwhelming, but concentrated. Moments of calm followed by moments of vulnerability. They're not oscillating, they're integrating. Integration often feels uneven because the mind and the heart don't always move at the same pace. That's normal. What matters is that they're moving in the same direction. Don't rush past this insight, because it affects how you respond if and when contact happens. The energy they bring won't be frantic or pleading. It will be deliberate. Measured. Even if emotions are present, there will be an underlying steadiness. That steadiness is the result of commitment, not detachment. Recognizing that difference will help you stay grounded rather than reactive. Stay here, because your role in this phase is subtle but powerful. You're not meant to decode every signal or anticipate every outcome. You're meant to remain centered. Centered energy acts like a stabilizer. When someone steps into honesty, the environment they step into matters. Calm allows truth to land without distortion. Listen carefully, because this is where old fears might try to resurface. Fears like, what if this changes things in a way I can't control, or, what if the move isn't what I hoped for? Those fears are understandable, but they're rooted in outcome attachment. What's being asked of you now is outcome neutrality. Neutrality doesn't mean indifference, it means trust in your capacity to respond wisely. Don't skip this moment, because your soulmate is also confronting a deeper question: what kind of connection do they want to sustain after this move? Irreversible actions demand consistency. They're evaluating whether they're ready not just for expression, but for follow-through. That evaluation matters more than the action itself. Stay with me, because this is where pacing becomes crucial. Growth that outpaces integration creates instability. Your soulmate seems to understand this instinctively now. They're not rushing to prove anything. They're allowing the decision to settle fully before expressing it outwardly. That restraint is a sign of maturity, not avoidance. Listen closely here, because you may notice a shift in how you perceive time. The days may feel slightly suspended, like you're in a holding pattern without anxiety. That's because your nervous system is adjusting to uncertainty without labeling it as danger. This is emotional resilience forming in real time. Don't look away now, because once the move is made externally, the emotional field changes immediately. Even if the action is small, its impact is not. Dynamics reset. Expectations recalibrate. Ambiguity loses its grip. And while that can feel exposing, it also brings clarity. Clarity reduces rumination. Rumination is what exhausts people. Stay here, because clarity doesn't always bring instant comfort. Sometimes it brings stillness first. Stillness can feel unfamiliar after long periods of tension. If you notice discomfort in calm, that's not a sign something is wrong. It's a sign your system is adjusting to a healthier baseline. Listen carefully, because your soulmate's next steps will likely be influenced by how grounded the response feels. This doesn't mean you're responsible for their choices. It means energy interacts. Calm invites honesty. Reactivity invites defensiveness. Remaining centered doesn't guarantee a specific outcome, but it does support authenticity. Don't skip this insight, because irreversible doesn't mean immediate. The decision has been made, but expression may unfold in stages. Stages allow for adjustment, feedback, and emotional regulation. That pacing protects both of you from overwhelm. Stay with me, because the most important thing right now is that you don't abandon yourself in anticipation. Stay connected to your routines, your values, your sense of self. When someone else makes a significant move, it can be tempting to suspend your own life. Don't. Presence is power. Listen closely now, because whatever unfolds after this will ask you to meet it with discernment, not fear. Discernment evaluates without panic. It listens without rushing to respond. That quality will serve you well no matter what direction things take. Don't look away at the end of this, because this phase is about trust, not blind trust in another person, but grounded trust in yourself. Trust that you can handle honesty. Trust that you can set boundaries if needed. Trust that you won't lose yourself in the process. Stay here. Breathe. Let the next moments come without forcing meaning onto them. What's unfolding has been shaped by intention, awareness, and courage. And you are equipped to meet it with clarity rather than confusion. If this message helped you feel steadier instead of more anxious, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because what follows after the move is made is where real understanding begins, and you don't have to navigate it alone. Don't leave just yet, stay with me, because this stage unfolds more quietly than the last, and that's why it's so easy to miss. After the move is made, after the line is crossed and reality adjusts, there's a moment where everything seems almost normal. That normality isn't denial. It's integration. Your soulmate is learning how to live inside the choice they made without rushing to decorate it with explanations or expectations. They're feeling the weight of permanence settle, not as fear, but as responsibility. Listen carefully here, because responsibility feels different from pressure. Pressure pushes. Responsibility steadies. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that what they chose isn't something they can manage from the edges. It asks for presence. It asks for consistency. It asks for them to show up even on days when the emotional intensity fades and only commitment remains. This realization doesn't scare them the way it once might have. It sobers them, and sobriety brings clarity. Stay right here with me, because you might notice your own emotions recalibrating too. Not spiking, not crashing, just reorganizing. You may feel moments of relief mixed with uncertainty, or calm mixed with curiosity. That blend is healthy. It means you're no longer stuck in anticipation mode. You're responding to reality as it forms, not to imagined outcomes. Don't skip this part, because it explains why communication, if it happens, might feel different now. Less charged. Less performative. More grounded. When someone acts from internal alignment rather than impulse, their words carry less urgency and more intention. You may notice fewer dramatic declarations and more thoughtful pauses. That's not lack of feeling, it's respect for consequence. Stay with me, because this is where old habits try to reassert themselves quietly. Habits of overthinking. Habits of scanning for meaning in every silence. Habits of assuming responsibility for another person's emotional state. Awareness now gives you a choice. You don't have to fall back into those patterns just because they're familiar. Familiar isn't always aligned. Listen closely, because your soulmate is also encountering echoes of the past. Not regrets, but memories that surface asking to be integrated rather than avoided. They're recognizing how previous versions of themselves navigated closeness, conflict, and vulnerability. This reflection isn't about self-criticism. It's about learning. Learning transforms experience into wisdom. Don't look away now, because wisdom brings restraint. Your soulmate may resist the urge to define everything immediately. Labels feel premature when reality is still settling. This restraint isn't confusion, it's care. Care for the truth of what's unfolding, care for the impact of words, care for sustainability rather than speed. Stay right here, because your own boundaries are becoming clearer during this phase. You may feel less tolerant of ambiguity that lacks honesty, but also less inclined to force clarity prematurely. That balance is emotional maturity. It allows you to remain open without abandoning discernment. Listen carefully now, because the emotional field between you is stabilizing. Stability doesn't mean stagnation. It means reduced volatility. Reduced volatility allows deeper connection to form without burning itself out. This is where trust begins to replace anticipation. Don't skip this moment, because trust feels unfamiliar if you're used to intensity. Intensity creates adrenaline. Trust creates calm. Calm can feel strange at first. You might even wonder if something is missing. What's missing isn't connection, it's anxiety. And anxiety often masquerades as excitement. Stay with me, because your soulmate is learning to sit with that calm too. They're noticing how different it feels to be emotionally honest without bracing for fallout. That experience reinforces their choice. It teaches them that truth doesn't always explode. Sometimes it settles. Listen closely here, because integration takes time. Just because a decision has been made doesn't mean its emotional implications are fully processed. Your soulmate may need space to understand how this choice intersects with their values, routines, and identity. Space isn't distance, it's digestion. Don't look away now, because you may feel moments of vulnerability arise unexpectedly. Vulnerability without panic is growth. It means you're allowing yourself to feel without immediately trying to control the narrative. That openness creates room for authentic response rather than reflexive reaction. Stay right here, because this is where self-trust becomes essential. You don't need to know how everything will unfold to remain grounded. You only need to trust your capacity to respond honestly when information arrives. That trust is stabilizing you more than you realize. Listen carefully, because your soulmate is also adjusting their expectations. Not lowering them, clarifying them. They're learning the difference between fantasy and reality, between intensity and depth. This clarification doesn't diminish connection, it refines it. Don't skip this insight, because refinement can feel like loss if you mistake drama for depth. But depth doesn't need chaos to be meaningful. Depth grows quietly, consistently, through shared presence and mutual respect. Stay with me, because your nervous system is learning a new rhythm. One that doesn't spike at every unknown. One that allows pauses without filling them with fear. This regulation is subtle but powerful. It changes how you experience connection at a foundational level. Listen closely now, because this phase invites patience, not waiting, but presence. Presence allows you to notice what's actually happening instead of what you fear might happen. Fear thrives on absence. Presence dissolves it. Don't look away, because this is where comparison loses its grip. You may stop measuring progress against timelines, stories, or expectations. What's unfolding between you doesn't need to resemble anything else to be valid. Comparison interrupts authenticity. Stay here, because your soulmate is also releasing the need to perform their growth. They don't need to prove anything anymore. Growth that's real doesn't announce itself, it expresses itself through consistency over time. Listen carefully, because you might feel a subtle sense of readiness forming. Not readiness for a specific outcome, but readiness for honesty. Honesty with them. Honesty with yourself. Honesty with what you can and cannot accept moving forward. Don't skip this part, because honesty doesn't always lead to continuation. Sometimes it leads to clarity that allows both people to move forward differently. Both outcomes are valid. Both are forms of alignment. What matters is that truth replaces confusion. Stay with me, because whatever direction this takes, it will ask you to stay connected to yourself. To respond rather than react. To choose presence over projection. Those choices protect your well-being regardless of outcome. Listen closely now, because this stage is about embodiment. Living inside the reality that's forming rather than hovering above it trying to predict the end. Embodiment grounds you. Grounded people don't get lost in speculation. Don't look away at the end of this, because the quiet you're experiencing now isn't emptiness. It's space. Space for understanding to deepen. Space for communication to find its natural rhythm. Space for you to remain whole. Stay right here. Breathe. Let the next moments arrive without forcing meaning onto them. What's unfolding now is steadier, truer, and more sustainable than anything built on urgency. If this message helped you feel calmer instead of more restless, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next layer brings insight that only reveals itself once stability is in place. And you're already closer than you think. Don't skip this, stay with me a little longer, because this phase is where meaning starts to settle into your body, not just your thoughts. After decisions are made and emotions stabilize, something deeper begins to form, understanding. Not the kind that answers every question, but the kind that allows you to stand steady even when questions remain. Your soulmate is entering this space now, where they're no longer reacting to what happened, but living inside what it means. Listen carefully, because this is where consistency quietly replaces momentum. The rush is gone. The adrenaline fades. What remains is a sense of responsibility toward the truth they chose. They're noticing that showing up now requires less courage and more integrity. Integrity asks different things than courage does. Courage says, "I'll face this." Integrity says, "I'll stay." And staying is where growth becomes real. Stay right here, because your own emotional landscape is shifting in response. You may notice that you're less focused on signs and more attentive to how you actually feel day to day. Less scanning. Less bracing. More presence. This isn't loss of interest, it's loss of anxiety. Anxiety often disguises itself as intensity. When anxiety loosens, things feel quieter, even deeper. Don't look away now, because your soulmate is learning how their inner world influences their outer behavior. They're becoming aware of subtle choices, how they listen, how they pause, how they respond when something feels uncertain. These micro-moments matter. They determine whether growth becomes embodied or stays conceptual. Right now, they're choosing embodiment more often than not. Stay with me, because embodiment changes the tone of connection. Words feel less loaded. Silence feels less suspicious. Presence feels enough on its own. This doesn't mean the connection has lost energy. It means the energy has settled into something more sustainable. Listen closely here, because restraint is becoming a form of care. Your soulmate isn't withholding, they're considering impact. They're thinking about how words land, how actions ripple, how timing shapes meaning. This level of awareness doesn't come from fear, it comes from respect. Respect for themselves. Respect for you. Respect for the truth they're carrying. Don't skip this insight, because respect often looks quiet from the outside. It doesn't perform. It doesn't rush to be understood. It allows space. If you're feeling less urgency now, that's not stagnation, it's mutual regulation. Two nervous systems learning not to spike each other. Stay right here, because you're also refining your own sense of self in this phase. You may notice that you're less willing to compromise your emotional clarity for the sake of keeping things smooth. That's not hardness. That's discernment. Discernment knows the difference between patience and self-erasure. Listen carefully now, because discernment doesn't demand immediate answers. It simply notices what aligns and what doesn't. You're beginning to trust that noticing is enough for now. That you don't have to act on every feeling to honor it. That restraint can coexist with honesty. Don't look away, because your soulmate is encountering moments of internal conflict that feel different than before. Not chaotic, not paralyzing, informative. These conflicts point to areas where growth is still integrating. Instead of avoiding them, they're sitting with them. Sitting with discomfort is one of the clearest signs of maturity. Stay with me, because sitting with discomfort is contagious in the best way. When one person does it, the other often feels permission to do the same. You may find yourself tolerating uncertainty better, resisting the urge to resolve everything immediately. That tolerance is not resignation. It's confidence in process. Listen closely here, because process doesn't move in straight lines. There may be days where things feel clear and days where things feel muted. That fluctuation doesn't mean regression. It means life continuing while growth integrates. Expecting linear progress creates unnecessary pressure. Don't skip this moment, because pressure distorts connection. It turns curiosity into interrogation and presence into performance. Right now, what supports alignment is softness. Softness isn't weakness. It's flexibility. Flexible things don't break under stress, rigid things do. Stay right here, because flexibility is becoming one of your strengths. You're learning to adapt without abandoning yourself. To stay open without losing boundaries. To listen without absorbing responsibility for what isn't yours. These skills don't arrive overnight. They're earned through moments like this. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate is redefining what vulnerability means to them. It's no longer about emotional exposure for validation. It's about truth shared with care. That kind of vulnerability is selective, intentional, and grounded. It doesn't seek reaction, it seeks understanding. Don't look away, because understanding takes time to build. It grows through repetition, not revelation. Through consistency, not confession. If things feel slower now, that's because they're being built to last rather than impress. Stay with me, because you may feel moments of doubt surface unexpectedly. Doubt isn't failure. It's a check-in. Ask yourself whether the doubt is asking for information or reassurance. Information comes from observation. Reassurance often comes from fear. Knowing the difference helps you respond wisely. Listen closely here, because wisdom is becoming your anchor. Wisdom doesn't rush clarity. It waits for it. It allows things to reveal themselves naturally. That patience protects you from forcing outcomes that aren't ready. Don't skip this insight, because forcing outcomes often leads to regret. Allowing outcomes leads to understanding. Even when the result isn't what you initially hoped for, understanding brings peace. Peace doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. Stay right here, because honesty is settling into both of you in different ways. For your soulmate, it's about living in alignment with their choice. For you, it's about honoring your needs without guilt. These forms of honesty support each other when given space. Listen carefully now, because space doesn't mean distance. It means room to breathe. Room to feel without pressure. Room to respond rather than react. This room is what allows connection to evolve rather than collapse. Don't look away, because evolution doesn't always look exciting. Sometimes it looks calm. Calm can feel unfamiliar if you've lived in emotional intensity for a long time. Give yourself permission to let calm be enough. Stay with me, because this is where trust deepens. Not trust in a specific outcome, but trust in yourself. Trust that you can navigate whatever unfolds without losing balance. That trust changes how you show up. It makes you steadier, clearer, and more grounded. Listen closely here, because grounded people don't need constant confirmation. They notice patterns over time. They listen to their bodies. They respond to reality rather than anticipation. You're becoming that kind of person now. Don't skip this final thought, because it matters more than it seems. Whatever comes next will meet you differently than it would have before. You're not the same person you were at the beginning of this process. Neither is your soulmate. Growth has already done its work. Stay right here. Breathe. Let the unfolding continue without rushing it. What's forming now is quieter, stronger, and more honest than anything built on urgency. And when the next clarity arrives, you'll recognize it not by excitement, but by peace. If this helped you feel steadier and more grounded, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next layer doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives with understanding, and you're ready for it. Don't skip this, stay right here, because this phase is where things stop feeling theoretical and start feeling lived in. After all the inner movement, reflection, and recalibration, something settles into a rhythm. Your soulmate is no longer asking big questions every moment. Instead, they're learning how to carry the truth they've already found. Carrying truth is different from discovering it. Discovery is emotional. Carrying is practical. It shows up in how someone wakes up, how they respond when they're tired, how they behave when no one is watching. Listen carefully now, because this is where consistency quietly takes over. Your soulmate is noticing that their internal world feels more stable than it has in a long time. Not perfect, not numb, stable. Emotional spikes are shorter. Reactions are slower. There's more space between feeling something and acting on it. That space is important. It's where choice lives. And choice is what separates growth from impulse. Stay with me, because you might feel something changing in your own body too. A sense that you don't need to hold your breath anymore. A release of that low-level tension you may not have realized you were carrying. You're not waiting in the same way now. You're present. Presence doesn't mean you don't care, it means you trust yourself enough not to collapse into anticipation. Don't look away here, because your soulmate is becoming more aware of how they show up in relationships overall. They're recognizing where they used to give just enough to avoid conflict but not enough to build depth. That awareness isn't filled with shame. It's filled with responsibility. Responsibility says, if I choose connection, I choose participation. And participation requires more than intention, it requires follow-through. Stay right here, because this is where effort becomes quieter and more sincere. Your soulmate isn't trying to prove growth. They're practicing it. That practice may look ordinary from the outside, but internally it's a big shift. They're learning to sit with emotions instead of outsourcing them. To feel without immediately seeking reassurance. To tolerate vulnerability without rushing to close it back up. Listen closely now, because this is also where patience transforms into trust. Trust doesn't rush outcomes. It allows them. You may notice that you're no longer replaying scenarios in your head as often. You're less tempted to predict what will happen next. That's not because you've stopped caring. It's because your nervous system feels safer not knowing everything yet. Don't skip this moment, because safety is a major theme here. Your soulmate is learning what emotional safety actually feels like. Not the illusion of safety created by distance or control, but real safety created by honesty and consistency. Real safety doesn't eliminate risk, but it reduces chaos. And when chaos reduces, clarity has room to grow. Stay with me, because clarity doesn't always arrive as answers. Sometimes it arrives as boundaries. You may notice that you're clearer about what you will and won't accept going forward. Not in a defensive way, but in a grounded one. Boundaries aren't ultimatums. They're self-respect made visible. And self-respect quietly changes how others engage with you. Listen carefully here, because your soulmate is also redefining commitment in their own mind. Not commitment as pressure or obligation, but commitment as presence over time. They're beginning to understand that real connection isn't maintained by intensity, but by reliability. Reliability doesn't create fireworks, it creates trust. And trust creates depth. Don't look away now, because this is where emotional honesty becomes sustainable. Instead of dramatic confessions or emotional highs, there's a steadier openness forming. If communication happens during this phase, it may feel simpler than expected. Fewer explanations. Fewer defenses. More listening. That simplicity isn't emptiness, it's maturity. Stay right here, because maturity can feel unfamiliar if you're used to emotional turbulence. Turbulence can create the illusion of depth. Calm reveals what's actually there. If things feel quieter now, don't mistake that for disconnection. Often, it means the connection no longer needs to shout to be felt. Listen closely now, because your soulmate is also learning to tolerate not being fully understood immediately. That's a big step. When someone stops demanding instant validation, they give relationships room to breathe. They're trusting that truth doesn't need to be forced to be real. Don't skip this insight, because it applies to you as well. You're learning that you don't need to explain or justify your feelings to make them valid. You're allowed to feel what you feel without packaging it perfectly. That permission creates inner calm, and inner calm creates clarity. Stay with me, because there may still be moments where uncertainty surfaces. That doesn't mean anything is wrong. Uncertainty is part of any living process. What's different now is how you relate to it. You're not spiraling. You're observing. Observation gives you information without draining your energy. Listen carefully here, because information gathered calmly is more accurate than conclusions drawn under stress. You're seeing things more clearly now because you're not rushing to label them. You're letting patterns reveal themselves over time. Patterns tell the truth better than isolated moments ever could. Don't look away, because your soulmate is becoming more intentional about where they place their emotional energy. They're less interested in half connections and more drawn to what feels reciprocal. This doesn't make them distant, it makes them selective. Selectivity protects growth. Stay right here, because selectivity may change how the connection feels. There may be fewer emotional swings, fewer mixed signals. Or there may be more intentional pauses. Both are signs of regulation, not withdrawal. Regulation allows connection to stabilize instead of constantly resetting. Listen closely now, because stabilization doesn't mean stagnation. It means the ground is firm enough for something real to stand on. Anything built now will be built with awareness, not fantasy. That matters. Fantasy collapses under pressure. Awareness adapts. Don't skip this part, because you may feel a sense of readiness forming without urgency. Readiness to respond honestly. Readiness to accept clarity. Readiness to walk away if something no longer aligns, and readiness to lean in if it does. That balance is emotional strength. Stay with me, because strength doesn't look like force. It looks like steadiness. It looks like knowing you'll be okay regardless of outcome. That knowing changes how you show up. It removes desperation. It creates dignity. Listen carefully here, because dignity changes dynamics. When you don't chase or retreat, you invite authenticity. Authenticity can't survive games or pressure. It thrives in calm presence. Don't look away now, because whatever comes next will come from this steadier place. Whether it's deeper connection, clearer communication, or an honest ending, it will feel cleaner than before. Clean doesn't mean painless, it means truthful. Stay right here. Breathe. Let this phase do its quiet work. You're not stuck. You're stabilizing. And stabilization is what allows the next step to be taken without regret. If this message helped you feel more grounded and less reactive, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next layer brings resolution, not rushed, not forced, but earned through presence and clarity.